Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. We have some ground to cover tonight. We're going to be learning Daf Kuf Lamed Tes and as well Daf Kuf Mem Amud Aleph, some beautiful Agadatas tonight and some halachic Gemaras as well. And we're going to start with the Gemara that I should have finished last night. We're at the bottom of Kuf Lamed Tes and Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Let's get started. Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Chas v'Shalom, shetishkach Torah miYisrael. We are not going to forget the Torah. Shne'emar ki lo tishkach mipi zaro. Our children, speaking from the Tanakh's perspective, the grandchildren, the descendants will not forget Torah. So then if that's true, then he has to fall back and try to figure out what the pasuk meant from the previous references. What does it mean that they're not going to find Hashem, they're not going to find halacha? It's not going to be without machlokas. Take a look at Rashi. Halacha berura, top Rashi, b'ta'amim shelo yeheba machlokas. There's going to be machlokas. And that's one of the challenges that we're seeing, that we of course now know. It used to be in an ideal world that there would be no machlokas. And look at all the machlokas that there is in Klal Yisrael with just some basic ideas. There's some shitas it's totally mutter to do something. Some shitas it's totally asur to do something. Like we were discussing in last night's Gemara. We discussed a shita that was chayv midoraisa and mutter lechatchila in the same exact source in the Tanaim. So that's a remarkable idea, very widespread. So that's what this is a reference to. Halacha berura, Mishnah berura, and Rashi points out that there's machlokas. Tanya, Rabbi Yossi ben Elisha Omer, Imraisa dor shetzaros rabos ba'osalav. If there is a generation in which there are tremendous tzaros, tremendous difficulties that are brought on a particular door, say ubidok b'dayana Yisrael. You should go and take a look at the judges of the Jewish people. Who are the dayanim? All of the bad things that happen to the world are only because of the Dayana Yisrael. Listen, those of you who are the heads of the Beis Yaakov, the officers of the Jewish people, those of you who the word from abominable, those who are disgusting about law, you make curved all which is straight, you build Tzion in blood, Yerushalayim be'avla, and you build it with sin. Rosheh b'shochad, you're taking bribes. Yishpotu, you're judging with bribes. The priests are taking money for their judgments. Unviyah b'kesev yiksomu, ve'al Hashem yishanu, and the Nevi'im are taking money for their nevuas. But yet at the same time, al Hashem yishanu. How does the pasuk understand this contradiction? All these terrible things that these people do, and at the same time that's true, they're still al Hashem yishanu. Says the Gemara, Rishayim hein. They are taka Rishayim. Ela shetalu b'tchonam b'misha amar b'haya olam. They're kind of dancing on two sides of the line. They're really not being so yashar, but they may appear from, but they're really not doing what's right. And these are the people who are the cause for tzaros ba'os Allah on a difficult generation. Says the Gemara, Lefichach, maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Gimel Puranios, they have 3 difficult things that are brought upon them. Keneged Gimel Averos Shebiyadam, for the 3 things that they did wrong, the ones that are mentioned in the Psukim. Rashi here highlights the Gimel Averos, top line, Dibra Maskal Gimel Averos, the Shochad Yishpotu, the Mechir Yoru, Unviyeh HaBekesev Yiksamu, that you are taking bribes as a judge, and you're going to be making psakim and bezdin, you're yoru, from the word yore, like a dayan, only for money, and you're gonna hire a navi for your own benefits. Those were the 3 things, and we have a number of Puranios. The Maharalmi Prague goes through what the link is between these averos and the resulting Puranios that come to the world because of those 3 averos. So that's what the Gemara says. It's not kishmak. Maybe Karesh Baruch Hu Gimel Puranios Keneged Gimel Ber Shevelam Shenemar Lachem Biglalchem Tzion Sadet Techaresh. The fields of Tzion will be plowed, meaning it'll be destroyed. Yerushalayim Iyin Tihye. It's going to be made into like molehills and mountains, and it'll be made difficult. But Har Habayis, and the place where Har Habayis should have been, Lavamos Yar, will be no different than a mound that's found in a forest. The only time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will allow for his Shekhinah to dwell on the Jewish people is when the Shoftim and Shotrim, the Rayim, the bad people who are the leaders of the Jewish people, when they are removed from Yisrael. Shenemar ve'ashiva Yodi alayich ve'etzrov kivor sigaych ve'asira kol b'dilayich ve'ashiva shoftecha kivrishano v'yotzecha k'vatchila. When you get rid of all of the bad things, then all of the bad people, all of the bad branches, we'll learn what that word means in a minute, the word sigaych, And that's when it'll be Shovtecha Kivar Yishana B'Yotzecha Kivatchila, having all the appropriate judges back. That's when the Shechina will come back. Amar Ula, Ein Yerushalayim, or according to some in Yisrael, Nifte El B'Tzdaka. The only way that Yerushalayim can be redeemed is through tzedakah. Shnemar Tzion b'mishpat tifadeh. What is it? V'shaveha b'tzedakah. I think that's been named before. No, is that like a? Oh, it's on V'shaveha. Yeah. Anyways, so that's what the pasuk is. That it's going to be b'mishpat tifadeh v'shaveha. It will be shaveha. It will be redeemed b'tzedakah when there is charity given. Amar Papa ibat le'yihire. You might have heard the word in Aramaic before called yuarot, the people who are bale gaiva. So if batle yahire, those who are bale gaiva, if those people are gotten rid of, then batle amgushe, then the amgushe will also be removed. It's going to be, if you do your part right, then the other part will be fixed for you. What's amgushe? Rashi, way toward the top sixth line of the Rashi, Dibur Hamaschel Batle Amgushe, Yivtilu Mesisimu Medichim, the people who push that no one should keep halacha, Masnim, Osanu, the people who are trying to hurt the Jewish people who don't like us, they try to make us do bad things. Ibatle Daine, if the Dayanim go away, Batle Gzirpte, we're not talking about good Dayanim, we're talking about bad ones. Rashi, Dibur Hamaschel Batle Dayane, about 12 lines down in Rashi, give or take. Dibur Hamaschel Batle Dayane, Rishayim Yisrael, Shematin Hadin, they're not yasher with the din, they're not yasher with halacha. When we get rid of them, so then what's going to happen? So then Batle Me'al Yisrael Gezir Petit. So that's Rashi explains Nogsei Shotre Ovdei Kochavim. These types of officers who worship other religions, who worship other idols. So that's what the Gemara says here in the name of Rav Papa. If we lower our gaiva, then it'll lower our the people who are against us. And if our bad dayanim are out of the picture, then we'll have less problems with the nations that surround us. Then the Gemara tries to figure out what's pshat for each one. Look at the word sigayich. It has the word gaseh. Right? It's from the word gas ruach, which is what we were just saying, yihire. And ibatle daine, batle gezirpte. What does it mean that if the bad judges are removed, then batle gezirpte, then the non-Jews who are influencing us negatively will be removed from our midst. That when you remove the people who are bad, then your enemies will turn away. Amar Rav Maloi, we'll hear his name a number of times today. Mishum Rav Elazar bar Reb Shimon, my dechsiv shavar Hashem. Let me just read this properly. Shavar Hashem matei rishaim shevet moshlim. What does that mean? Shavar Hashem matei rishaim. Hashem will break the sticks of the rishaim. Elu hadayanim. These are judges. Shenasem makel elechazanehem, whose underlings, their employees, are they're kind of twisting their arms. They're doing what they should not be doing. And so, like, basically they're saying, give me a raise, otherwise I'm going to make. So then the dayanim are not putting their foot down. So they've given the makel, they've given the stick, they've given the discipline, the chazanim, to their underlings. Shevet moshlim. What does that mean? These are the rabbis and the families of these bad dayanim. We're like, okay, there's a shita that you could be lenient on. We can be mitzareh. They're kind of painting halacha in a way which is disingenuous. Mar Zurcha Amar, no, it's not the mishpachos hadayanim. Elu tamidei chacham shemalamdim halachos tzibur ledayane bur. You're teaching someone who is they either don't have the mental capacity to be a dayan. It's quite rigorous. You have to know a tremendous amount of information at your fingertips. And more difficult is to know how to combine shitas together in order to come up with kulas and sometimes chumras as well. So here's just a different spin on what it means that these people, these were talmidei chachamim who were teaching Torah to dayanim who were not really fit to be dayanim. Next story from Rabbi Elazar ben Maloi. Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Maloi mishum Rish Lakish ma'dichsiv. What does the pasuk mean when it says ki chapechem negoalu vadam vesbosechem be'avon sifsosechem dibru sheker l'shonachem avla sehge? What does that pasuk mean? Ki chapechem negoalu bedam elu hadayanim. These are the bad kinds of dayanim. They're kapechem, their hands are nigoalu bedam. They're with blood. Vesbosechem be'avon. What does it mean that their fingers are with sin? Elu sofrei hadayanim. These are the people who write down the dinim, the psakim of the dayan who's a bad dayan. Sifsosechem dibru sheker. What does that pasuk mean? That people were saying bad words. Elu orchei hadayanim. These are the lawyers who are not being yashar. L'shonchem avla sehge. What does that mean? That your words are teaching bad things. Ela bale dinin. These are the people as well. These are the defendants who are arguing their own cases as well, and they're not being yashar as well. Next case of his, Mishum Rabbi Yitzchak Magdala'a, Miyom Shepiresh Yosef Me'echav. From the time that Yosef separated from his brothers, Lo ta'am yayin. He never tasted wine. Dichsiv ukodkod nizir echav, a reference to Nazirus, which of course we know is a person who's not allowed to drink wine at all, even mishras, any derivatives at all. The Meforshim point out he wasn't actually a Nazir because we know that when Yosef was taken out of the pit, it said by Galach, by a same, what's the pasuk? By a same simlosav. He was brought before Paro. I can't, no? Vigalach, something like that. I know that he got a haircut. Okay, no, he got a haircut. So he wasn't actually a Nazir, but for some reason, maybe he felt a distance between his brothers, so he did not drink. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, Amar. What? So then he says here that it wasn't just Yosef, it was also the brothers. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, Amar, Af hein lo tamu tam yam. They didn't drink either. Dichsi vayishtu vayishkaru imo. That when they finally did get together, they got drunk together. Michlal de'ad ha'id navo, which has a subtle implication. It's not a raya barura, but it seems to be the case that they did not drink beforehand. The idach, and going back, how do we under another shita basically? Shichrus hudelo hava, shisia miha hava. That when it comes to Yosef, he did not get drunk, but he did have wine. There's different ways to understand what happened in regards to the consumption of wine after the period of time of Yosef being sold. Another one. Bischar, when the pasuk says, when Moshe had mamish, when Aaron had mamish a simcha for his brother, for his younger brother, that he was going to be one of the leaders of the Jewish people, because he mamish in the depths of his heart, no kina, no jealousy. Because of that, he merited Zachal Choshen Mishpat Alibo. He merited to become the Kohen Gadol. Shalchu lo b'nei Bashchar leLevi. B'nei Bashchar sent a couple of shilas through the mail to Levi, and here were the questions they asked. Kila mahu, what's the story with a canopy on Shabbos as it relates to Ohel? Kshusa bekarma mahu, what about planting hops in regards to kiloi hakerem? Is that allowed on Shabbos? Is that allowed at all? Meis biyom tov mahu, what should we do with people who die? Ad azil, while the letter was in the mail, nach nafshe de Levi, unfortunately Levi had passed away. Omar Shmuel le Rav Menachem. Now Levi was a very early Amor. It was the first century Amor. He was one of the authors of the Tosefta, one of the collectors of the Tosefta. And Shmuel was second generation. So he probably, after Levi died, Shmuel was still alive. He's a little bit younger. And he said to Rabbi Nasya, who was again older in Levi's generation, said, "Ichakimas, if you have the wisdom, shalach lahu." They were looking through his mail. I don't know how that worked out. They looked through his mail. They saw there were some shilas. So he sent back letters, shalach lahu. So then Rabbi Nasya wrote back to the Bnei Bashchar. And here's what he said: Kila, in regards to the canopy, chazarnu al kol tzidei kila. We looked at it from all different angles. You're not allowed to use a canopy on Shabbos. Why didn't you say the case of Kila that we learned yesterday? That where you have a canopy that's connected by strings, it's already affixed a little bit. So that's mutter. Why didn't you say that case? Answers the Gemara, b'nei Torah. That's not an answer you give to the masses. That's an answer that you can give to the B'nai Torah, because it's very easy to make a mistake where connected is it not connected. The best example I can think of this is the rain cover for a stroller. Is it on? Is it not on? So if it's not on, no, I'll put it on. That's Nisr D'Rabbanan. You're not allowed to put it on once it's already Shabbos. That's so you just got to get the kid wet. What can you do? Or you rely on whatever canopy there is, cover the kid in a towel. But you can't go put on a plastic thing on Shabbos if it's not already on. So because these people were not B'nai Torah, the B'nai Bashchar were not B'nai Torah, so you wanted to teach them a little bit more of a Chum or Din. So he did not go with the opinion of Rami Bar Yechezkel in regards to Kila. Kshusa bekarma, irbuva. In regards to the kshusa bekarma, the hops that are planted in the field, so there we do have a concern of kiloi hakerem. L'shlach lahu kid Rabbi Tarfon. Why, in regards to hops, did you not write like the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon? To Tanya, he writes in the Brisa, Kishos, in regards to hops, Rabbi Tarfon Omer ein kiloim bekeren. Why were you machmir? We have a sheet of Rabbi Tarfon. Why would you not give the more lenient opinion of kiloi hakerem, and v'chachamim more kiloim bekerem, that they do hold that the hops, that the kshusa are kiloi hakerem. V'kaimalan, we have a general rule: kol hamekil ba'aretz halacha kamosu b'chutz la'aretz. That anyone who is lenient in regards to Eretz Yisrael, that should be the din should be like them in chutz la'aretz. So Rabbi Tarfon should have been the opinion that. Who was writing the letters at this point? The Rabbi Menasya sent back to the Bnei Bashchar. Why did he pick the strict opinion? Same answer, the Vishain and Bnei Torah, because the Bnei Bashchar were not grace of people. They were not the people who could have been given the literal. Then we were afraid they were going to make a mistake. Machriz Rav made a public statement. Hi man de boy the Mizrach Shusa bekarma lizara. He didn't agree. He held like Rabbi Tarfon that you're allowed to plant it. Rav Amram Chasida man gid ilavei. Rabbi Amram would be mangid. He would hit people with a whip. He'd give them malchos for planting them. He'd say that's also you're not allowed to do that. It's considered kilei akarim. Rabbi Masharshia yoivle pruta latino nachri v'zarale. What Rabbi Masharshia do is he'd find a child who was a goy and have that child drop the seeds in, and he would pay him for it. Why can't we have a young Jewish child, get a 3-year-old to walk there and drop some seeds of the hops, so that even he's the one planting, there won't be any kilei akarim. He's a child. Says the Gemara, Asi lemisrach. We're afraid that it will either miseducate him or misinform him, one of the two. We have this idea in halacha called srach bita. This is why we don't allow a woman to go to the mikveh during the day, even on the day after the night she's supposed to go to the mikveh. We don't allow that because of srach bita. So this idea of the misrach is to miseducate and misinform. V'litin la legadol nachri. Why did he say you have to pick a child who's a nachri? Why can't you pick a gadol who's a nachri? Why does it have to be a child? Asi la'achlufe b'Yisrael. We're afraid that you're gonna make a mistake and you may ask a Jew. It's a very strange concern. Jews and non-Jews have very different sets of halachos that govern them. Non-Jews have 7. We have 613. It's not so simple to. So the Gemara is going very far here, probably for the similar line, because it's b'nei bashchar. So that's what the Gemara says, is that they were afraid of using even a gadol nachri out of concern to switching that person, God forbid, with a Yisrael, and then you would violate the Yisrael kilei akarim by planting the hops. 2 lines from the bottom, the third question that was asked to Levi, and then he died, and then Rabbi Nasya wrote back, he was penning the letter. What about a mace? Shalach lahu mace lo yis'asku be lo Yehudayin v'lo Armayin. When it comes to a person who dies, no one should deal with a mace on Yantiv, not a Jew and not a non-Jew. Lo b'yom tov rishon, lo b'yom tov sheni, not the first day of Yantiv and not the second day of Yantiv. Says the Gemara, that's not true. Aini, you can't tell me that you're not allowed to bury a mace on Yantiv. V'haraya v'ha'amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Shila samar Ravasi uvda haba bevekinishta de Ma'on b'yom tov hasamach l'Shabbos. There was a story in Ma'on where there was a Yantiv that was close to Shabbos. Turning to the top of Kuf Lamed Tes Medbeis lo yadana milafaneha imel achareha. We don't know where Yantiv fell out, if it was before or after Shabbos. But either way, v'asu l'kamed de Rabbi Yochanan v'amar luhis asku be'amamin. Find a guy to bury the mace. So v'haraya, we see that we are oseg with a mace on Yantiv. So how could you just come and tell me Rabbi Nasya is writing this letter? Yeah, not Jews, not that's not true. The Amamin, we have Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan lived in the same generation as Shmuel. Rabbi Nasya probably knew him. They probably lived very close in time together, so they might have known each other. V'amar Rava, not only that, mace b'yom tov rishon yis'asku bo amamin, very specific then. On Yom Tov Rishon, if a mace dies, you ask a guy to bury him. B'yom tov sheni yis'asku bo Yisrael. And on the second day of Yantiv, you ask a Jew to bury him on the second day of Yantiv. So this opinion of Rav Menasya is very difficult to understand. He was so categorical. You're not allowed to do any burials on Yantiv. Bein b'yontiv rishon, bein b'yontiv sheni, bein Yehuda, bein b'Armayin. It's not true. We've got Amoraim who paskin differently. V'afilu b'yom tov sheni shel Rosh Hashanah. Mashein came to Beitza. That's also even true achidish, even true by Rosh Hashanah, which we know from the Gemara is a Yom Ha'arichta. It's different than a regular Yantiv. It's different. It's not even Yom Tov Sheni. It's a Yom Ha'arichta. We treat them the same. We treat them quite strictly. The first and second day are the same. Even there, Rava would agree that on the second day of Yantiv, a Jew can bury even. So it says the Gemara, Masha'in came to Beitza, which is not true by an egg. Beitza Shnol de Yantiv is going to be usher throughout Yantiv. So what do we see from here? We see that Rabbi Nasir was being machmer with this group yet again. Why is he being so strict with the Bnei Bashchar? Answers the Gemara, Lefisha Einan Bnei Torah. He wanted to be strict on them to ensure that they were not going to get close to violating halacha. Says the Gemara, 6 lines down, on Kuf Lamed Tes Medbeis. Amar Rav Avin bar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Chama bar Guria. Mis'atef Adam Bekila Uvekaskaseha V'yotze L'Reshus Harabim B'Shabbos V'Nechoshesh. You're allowed to take this type of canopy, and it may have these little hanging things from the bottom. That's not a problem. Mutter to walk out in that on Shabbos, even in a Reshus Harabim. It's basically like a garment. Says the Gemara, how does that work out? My Shlomi de Rav Huna. We saw opinion of Rav Huna that wrote, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. If you are carrying a garment, if you're wearing a garment that is a talis but without strings, you're chai v'chatas. So why is it that we don't care about the strings when they're hanging off of the canopy, but when the strings are missing from the garment, we say you're chai v'chatas? One's mutter and one's an isra d'oraisa. That's very strange. So he says, if it's not mitzuyetzes kilchas b'Shabbos chai v'chatas. So answers the Gemara, because tzitzis lagabe talis chashive v'lo badle, because the tzitzis, they play an integral role. If you have them, it's a beged d'oraisa. If you don't have it, it's an isra aset. You're not allowed to wear that garment at all. Hani, but in regards to this garment, the canopy that has these tassels that are hanging off of it, lo chashive, they're just not chashiv at all. We're not looking at it the same way, so you can't compare one to the next. Omar Rabba bar Rav Huna, we are allowed to do ma'arim. We're allowed to do like the loophole ha'arama ma'arim adam al mishmeres b'yom tov. We spoke about in our Mishnah that whether or not one is allowed to hang up a netting on their like let's say from a hook and then to pour things through it on Shabbos, or even to put some fruits in there on Shabbos. We're talking about the case of wine from our Mishnah. So it says the Gemara, we can do a ha'arama. What's the ha'arama we could do? 1/3 of the way down. Ma'arim adam ala mishmeres b'yom tov. What do you do? Litlos barimonim. Put pomegranates inside the sieve, inside the colander, and then no problem. And then the tola bashmarim. And then it can be used for the shmarim, for the pieces of the wine that might get stuck through there. Amar Rav Ashi, who detala barimonim, but you have to actually put up the rimonim. You can't just conceptually say, in theory, I would have put the rimonim there. The only way the ha'arama works is when you actually have the rimonim there. Says the Gemara, why? My shnami hadatanya, we have a brisa where seemingly we don't actually have to do something active when we're doing the ha'arama. What's that case? The brisa writes, Matilin shechar b'moed l'tzarach hamoed. You're allowed to make beer on yontif for yontif. Shelo l'tzarach hamoed aser. If you're making it for afterwards, you're not allowed echad shechar tamarim, echad shechar seorim. Whether or not it's beer made from tamarim, from dates, or whether it's made from barley. Afal pi sheyesh lahen yashan ma'arim v'shosim min hachadash. And even though you have older wine, you're allowed to make a ha'arama, and you can make and drink the new wine. Why? I don't understand. Why are you saying that here you don't have to drink the yashan wine, but over there you have to put in the pomegranates? You're being inconsistent. So says the Gemara, Hasan by the beer, lo mukha milsa. It's not noticeable what wine you're drinking. Mamash, you'd have to be a connoisseur to look at a cup of wine and say, oh, that's from the old bottle, or that. Unless you're tasting it and you can taste the difference, but it doesn't look so bad. It looks like you're just drinking wine. However, hacha, by the pomegranates, if they're not actually in the sieve, so then clearly you haven't done anything noticeable. Then it just looks like you're violating Shabbos in regards to borer. That's why if you want to do the ha'arama, then you have to actually put in the pomegranates. Amr le Rabbanan, the Rabashi, Chazi Mar Haitzur B'mei Rabbanan. We saw this great rabbi, the Rav Huna bar Chivan Shemei, and his name was Rav Huna bar Chivan, and some say his name was not that. Amr le Rav Huna B'Rebbe Chilvan Shemei. The Shakal Bara de Tuma, he took a clove of garlic, tuma, taf and shin in Aramaic are interchangeable, shum. He took that garlic, umanach bebarza dedana, and he took it and he shoved it in to the opening of a barrel. What was his svara? The Omar, I'm just leaving it to stay there. Really, he had an ulterior motive, but it's a ha'arama. He wanted to clog it up so nothing could leak out. But it was considered mutter, that ha'arama is mutter. The azil v'na'im b'mivra v'avar lahachisa. This person went to go take a nap on a boat. The boat was stationary when he left. When the boat was stationary, he just went to go take a nap. And when he woke up, he was lahachis on the other side of the water. The seer peiray, and he went to go just look at his field. Obviously, you can't touch your field. It's yontif. You're not allowed to do it. But that was what he did. That's pretty intense. The Amar ana leminam kamichavna. I just wanted to take a nap. Amar lehu. He said to them, ha'arama kamrisu. This is not really a ha'arama. This is ha'arama b'derabbanan. This is only ha'arama on a rabbinic level. But the tzur b'mei rabbanan lo asi lemabal lechatchila. But by a tzur b'mei rabbanan, by a great Talmud Chacham, he's not going to make these kinds of mistakes. See, nowadays we don't really have this, where we allow for a Talmud Chacham more latitude in halacha. Typically speaking, the way that we function in halacha is that if there's a halacha for one, there's a halacha for all. We don't really have this like, oh, you're a Talmud Chacham, you can rely on the leniencies of ha'arama. You're not a Talmud Chacham, no, we don't really do that nowadays. Correct. Yeah, in the Mikdash and Gvula, we make those distinctions. Those because Kohanim is reason here. We have like a real svar and halacha that the Kohanim was reason. But stam. When I say stam, I say your average Talmud Chacham in the street, a dayan saying a poskim in our base fetish. We're going to treat them differently in halacha. I don't think so. We don't make those distinctions. So this was probably a hashkafa that applied then and not now. 2/3 of the way down in Kuflam and Tessimud Beis, starting a new Mishnah. Nostin mayim al gabe hashmarim bishvil sheyitzolu. You're allowed to pour water through a sieve, that even if there are already shmarim there, already some sediment from the wine there, it may add some color to the water. But we have a principle called ein svia ba'ochlin, that changing the color of a liquid on Shabbos or a food is really not problematic, as we will shortly see. You're allowed to filter water through certain garments, and through a basket that's referred to as a kfifa mitris. And you can take a raw egg and you can allow the yellow part to drip through to change the color, to make the color of the mustard seeds into a yellow. That's what they were doing here. So the yolk of an egg has a tiny film around it called a vitelline envelope. When I was in biolab, they made us dissect. They made us dissect the vitelline envelope when we were working with eggs in the lab. It was, and when you do that, then it comes out super liquidy, and then the albumin, though, the clearer part of the egg is much more stringy and won't go through the filter. So what they were doing is they put the raw egg in, they would just pierce that little envelope, and then it would all drip out and drip through. And they said that was mutter. So the Rishonim here are going to deal with why that's mutter, because why isn't that borer? Both of them are good. Do we look at borer in a snapshot of time? Right now, I want the yellow because I want it to stain the mustard. But what about the other stuff that I don't want? I'll eat it later. We don't usually look at borer that way. Usually we look at borer as I want one of the red jelly beans. So if I'm taking out the blue ones, that's borer. We usually look at borer in isolation, but here it seems to imply that there's nothing wrong with allowing the yolk to drip through. Why are we making such an allowance? The Rishonim here deal with that. And there's a Rashi on the top of the page.
You're using the egg as an example. If, let's say the wife wants the egg whites only and the husband wants the egg yolk. You're separating it, but you're using both as good.
Right, so that's just a discussion of who does what. Like the poskim asked that if you are pulling away skin from chicken, so which hand moves? Do you pull the chicken towards you because that's what you want? Or do you pull the skin away from you because that's borer? So those kinds of questions.
That situation of skin I don't want.
But are you allowed to take the skin off your plate and put it on your wife's plate who wants it? By you, that's psolas. So that's these are the subtleties of it. So really, ideally,
even though you're both going to eat it, it's all good.
Correct. So normally we look at borer in an isolated vacuum of what you're doing. I don't want the blue thing right now. So your wife can take the piece of the food off of your plate that she wants. My kids don't some kids don't like matzah ball. So instead of them giving it to me, I'll take it. Because by them, that's mamash psolos mitoch ochel. So it's just it's cleaner. But we'll see a Rashi on the top of the page that seems to imply that there's a bit of a more flexible perspective on this. So last night we discussed an afkimiyah between borer and meraked, and the Gemara makes similar distinctions about what's permissible and what's not. Is it considered borer? Would you drink it? Would you not? Would you drink it even if there were grinds in the coffee? In which case, for sure, it's not borer. Just like a Brita filter. You cannot use a Brita filter if you wouldn't drink the water without, because then it's mamish serving a purpose for you.
Yeah, but here, what's the problem? You have an egg that goes in and an egg that comes out.
Nope, just the yellow comes through. The clear part of the egg stays in the filter. So that's a little borer.
You crack an egg, and then
This is on Yantif, by the way, not Shabbos, but yeah.
crack an egg.
You crack an egg. You poke the yolk so that it can drip down, because it's less viscous than the clear part of the egg. It drips down, it stains the mustard seeds like you wanted. Ein tzvi ba'ochel. And so that's a great way to stain them. That's great. But why isn't that borer? Should be. The Rashi on the top of the page we'll talk about it. Let's get there.
The strainer is not straining. It's the mustard seeds that are straining the.
Mustard's beneath in a bowl. Strainer's up here, mustard seeds are down here. So I crack open the egg. And then we poke the vitelline envelope and it drips all the way out, and all the clear part of the egg stays up top. So it should be borer, but Rashi, we can cheat and look at the top of the page. It says, Rashi says, Dibra maschel ela legavein. So the Gemara says, Lamare she'achelmon yafa legavein. The yolk is very good for staining, v'lo hachelbon, not the clear part. Hilkach idi ve'idi ochelhu. Both of them have a status of ochel. The ein kan beriras psolas mi ochel. This is not considered bad from good. This is just not how we normally look at borer. Normally we look at borer in a vacuum.
So in the matzo ball situation is not a problem.
Yes, it is if you take it out.
They're both considered a problem.
But klape me, in my vacuum, I don't like matzo ball, so I can't give it to you, but you can take it. Okay, we'll get there. We'll get there a little bit more. So let's continue in the Mishnah here. So that's the case. V'nosin beitza b'misanenes shel chardal. V'osin anumalin b'Shabbos. You're allowed to make anumalin. We'll see what type of food that is. It's a liquid of sorts. Yehuda Omer b'Shabbos. On Shabbos, you're allowed to make a cup's worth, b'kos. V'yom tov b'lagin. And Yom Tov, you can make an even larger amount. U'v'moed and chol hamoed b'Chavis, you can make as much as you want. Rabbi Tzadok Omer Hakol Lefi Ha'orchen. No, you cannot just make these random objective amounts on these days. You have to be able to really make what's necessary. You can't just make as much as you want. You might run into some hachana problems. Omar Zeiri, beginning of the Gemara, last of the short lines. No sein Adam Yain Salul Umayim Tzelulim L'Tocha Mishmeres B'Shabbos V'Nechoshesh. Aval Achurin Lo. You can take clear wine, clear water. You're allowed to pour it to receive on Shabbos, no problem. The key line here, Aval Achurin Lo. But if it's cloudy, if it's murky, you're not allowed to pour it through. Obviously, we're concerned about borer. So it says the Gemara, Mesive, that's not true. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Tored Adam Chavis Shel Yain, you're allowed to stir the wine, Yena Ushmareha, the wine and the other parts that are floating in there. There we see you can mix it all up, stir it all up, and pour it right through. That's achurin. That's dirty water. That's dirty wine. But seemingly, you would have thought. Otherwise, why are you pouring it through? So then, how does the first line of the Gemara of Zeiri, which says that aval achurin lo, how does that align with this case of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? Here, Gemara Zeiri. What are we talking about? The case of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel must be talking about bein hagitos, when it's like in the process of being built. In that earlier stage, people are willing to drink it even with what's in there, even with the skins, even with the chunky parts of the grape. They're going to make a borei pregaf and they're going to eat the whole thing. But in a final product, that you're not allowed to pour through if it's achurin. That already, you're being mocked. But at your Shabbos table, I see things floating in my wine. I'm going to pour it through. But if it's in the earlier phase, we don't know this phase. But in the earlier phase of making wine, when everything's all mixed up, so then in that case, then we would pass him like seemingly like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, that you're allowed to even put yain achurin through the filter because you would have had the wine to drink no matter what. The sanan and the sayayin b'sudarin, you're allowed to filter some of the wine in through garments. Amar Reb Simi barchia ubilvad shelo yaseh guma, but you have to keep it taut. You can't like let it collect into like this pocket of a garment because then we're afraid of schiti. You'll squeeze the bubble to get out. It makes perfect sense, right? Just think about the psychology. You have this garment and then like you kind of let it all collect in the middle, and it's like you just want to squeeze it to get out the wine. It's perfect. So that's what the Gemara says here is that we're concerned about that. The basket that we said you're allowed to put some wine through. You cannot have it a tefach away from what is underneath it if you're going to put it in the basket. Why? Because that's making an ohel. Same thing we started with in our Mishnah. We said ein tolin. You're not allowed to hang that basket up. Here we allow it as long as it's within one tefach of the receiving kli. Amar Rab, hai prunka. Apalge de kubashari. If you have like a blanket or a towel, maybe a towel is probably a better word. If you have a towel, you're allowed to put it on palge de kuba, on half of the barrel. However, akule kuba, putting it on the whole barrel or the whole utensil, that's not allowed because that's a cs ohel de rabbanon. Amar Papa lo nehadek inish tsinyasa. Sorry, I lost my line here. Bepume de kuzni. You're not allowed to jam in these small pieces of wood, kind of like toothpicks or wood chips. You cannot jam them into the opening of a chavis mishum the mechzek mishmeres, because that's how they would make a filtration system. They didn't have always such easily available mesh like we do. We could buy it in the store. So what they would do is they would jam in the wood. The liquid would easily pour out, and everything that would be a solid would get stuck at the ends of the toothpicks. So that's not allowed because it's mechzek mishmeres. 3 lines from the bottom. The Be'er Papa, Shafu Shichra Mimana Lamana. This is brilliant. This is what they would do. They would take their beer and they pour from one cup to the next. And if there was any sediment left in it, then it would kind of get stuck on the bottom. So just kind of like pouring back and forth, and then they'd be able to leave over stuff in the bottom. And that was a great way. That was what he said was permissible. That's what they did. Shafu Shichra Mimana Lamana. Amar le Ravacha midifti. Well, wait a minute. The Ravina, how you can eat tzotzos. What happens when you get to the bottom? That's really borer. You're really, at the bottom, there's a real concentration of all of the sediment that was in there. As you've been pouring, the sediment you're not pouring off the sediment. So as you keep pouring, you're getting less and less of the sediment. So what about the nitzotzos? Says the Gemara, nitzotzos, the Be'er Papa, lo chashivi. To them, that it was like irrelevant to them. It didn't bother them one way. They would have eaten it, they would have not eaten it. It didn't make a difference. So says the Gemara of Enostin Beitza b'Masanenes. This was a sugya we started talking about at length in the Mishnah. Tani Yaakov Karcha. What did he say? Pishein Osin. Turning to the top of Kuf Mem Amud Aleph. Pishein Osin Osa Ela Legavein. It's mutter to do this because you're only doing it to stain the mustard seeds, as Rashi said at the top of the page. And again, the shaila about whether or not we look at the world like Rashi does, which is that it's objectively speaking, both of them are foods. So there's no reason why we should say that it's problematic. Nevertheless, Rashi says, last 4 words of Rashi on the top of the first line, even though you have the chelmon and the chelbon being the yolk and the chelbon being the clear part of the egg. So there the Gemara says that that's totally mutter. Itmar. Chardal shalashu me'erev Shabbos. You began mixing up mustard before Shabbos. L'machar, once it's already Shabbos, so then, Omar Rav, memachu bekli aval lo biyad. You are only allowed to continue mixing it with a kli. This sounds backwards. You can only mix with a kli and not with your hand? Ask the Gemara, what are you talking about? Omar le Shmuel biyad? Atu kol yom memachu le biyad? Do you always mix this with your hands such that the shinui is to do it with a kli? This is Maichal Chamorim, who I don't understand. Like, why are you treating this in such a weird way? We don't do that. The way we do this is we relatively simply, we start things with a kli during the week, right? Not your bare hands, says the Gemara. Ella, he takes his question and runs with his own suggestion. Ella Amar Shmuel memachu biyad ve'ena memachu b'kli. You're right. On Shabbos, once you started the mixing before Shabbos, then on Shabbos day you're allowed to mix with your hands, but you're not allowed to mix with a kli. Itmar Rabbi Elazar, Amar echad zeh ve'echad zeh aser, both with a kli and with your hands is aser. Rabbi Yochanan Amar echad zeh ve'echad zeh muter. He said, no, stirring this mustard with a kli or with your hand is permissible. Abaye Amar, Abaye v'Rabba de'amrei tarvayu ein halacha ki Rabbi Yochanan. In this first version, it seems that the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar, that everything is asr, because the halacha is not like Rabbi Yochanan. Then everybody changed their minds. Come Rabbi Yochanan b'shit seid Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yochanan changed his mind and started to hold like Rabbi Elazar, that everything should be asr, that the mixing of the mustard is not allowed b'kli or b'yad. And then come Rabbi Elazar b'shit seid Shmuel. They switched their opinions. I don't know who convinced who of what, but now Rabbi Elazar is now the lenient one, and Rabbi Yochanan is the machmir one. If that's the case, halacha ki Rabbi Yochanan. Now you have to look at the history. Rava and Abaye lived later than Shmuel and Rabbi Elazar. So what they didn't know was who said what. They weren't sure if Rabbi Yochanan was the mekel or the machmir. They knew what the din was. The din was that it was asur. So when they thought that Rabbi Elazar was the machmir, they said the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar. But when they heard that the people said that Rabbi Yochanan switched his opinion to hold like Rabbi Elazar, then they said the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan. They knew the din. This is a historical problem. Like they're 100 years out. They knew what the psak was. They just didn't know where it came from. So whatever the history was, they don't know. That we're not sure in the books who held what. Seemingly Rabbi Yochanan, if we follow the flow of the Gemara, he concluded the chumrah, and the Abaye and Rabba sided like him. We learned already about Abaye that this was not actually his mother, but a caretaker of sorts. Ime de Abaye Avdale, she made this mustard dish that she stirred on Shabbos. Avdale made it for Abaye v'lo achal. He wasn't willing to eat it. Remember, we just saw a line above. Abaye v'Rabba held like Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan's second version that he was machmir. So he wasn't willing to eat it because Abaye held like Rabbi Yochanan. Debisu de Zeira, we saw this Gemara earlier, that the wife of Zeira, Avdale, she made this dish, Rav Chia Barashi v'lo achal. She made it for Rav Chia Barashi, and Rav Chia Barashi would not eat it. Amra le, she said to Rav Chia Barashi, l'Rabcha avidi le'v'achal. For my husband, your Rebbe, for Zeiri, I made it, and he ate it. Ve'at lo achal, you're more firm than your Rebbe. Come on, it's got to be mutter to eat. Amra, the Gemara pivots now. We spoke about this Gemara many blot ago. When was that? Kein zeh le'el daf kuf tes, about 30 blot ago. So it says the Gemara, Amar Rabba bar Shiva hava ka'imna kamid ravina. And he stirred up this mustard with a shufta de tuma, again a tuma Aramaic, tough and shin, with a clove of garlic, and he ate it. Seemingly he took the more lenient approach. Amar Mar Zutra, leis hilchasa kichol hanishmaitza. We don't paskin like any of this. Ella ki hadi itmar as follows. We hold like this following statement of the Amoraim. Chardal shalashu me'erev Shabbos. If you begin the mixing process of mustard on Erev Shabbos, Lamachar, on the next day, memachu bein biyad bein bekli. We are most lenient. We don't follow any of the strict shittas of Abaye and Rabba. B'nosnein letocho dvash. You can even add in honey. Below yitro, ella me'arev. You're not allowed to stir it up very well. You can't like take one of those whisks and like really get it good and really just get it all perfectly smooth. Ella me'arev. You can just mix it gently. Shachalayim, which is a cress, a type of plant. Sheshachkan me'erev Shabbos. If you prepared it, if you ground it up before Shabbos, then mamachar, the next day, nosim l'sochan shemen v'chomet u'mamshich l'sochan amisa. You're allowed to add oil, you're allowed to add vinegar, and you're allowed to add amisa, which we will see what that is shortly. And here too, below yitro, if you cannot whisk it up perfectly, elamar, just gentle mixing. Shum, garlic, sherisku me'erev Shabbos, that you crushed before Shabbos. Then in that case, the machar on Shabbos itself, nosim l'sochel pula grease, and you can add in beans, below yishchok ela me'erev, but you below yishchok ela me'arev. You can't grind it up very, very well, but you can just mix it up gently. We said earlier that you're allowed to add to the shachalaim mamshich es amisa l'sochan. My amisa. What is this amisa? Says the Gemara, ninya. Rashi, mint. Rashi says minta. And it is the mint that we know. That's why we call it, nanati. It's actually an older word from a previous language, maybe French. I'm not sure what the actual etymology is from. Rashi regularly quotes words from the French language. If you look in Rashi, 6-7 lines down, Dibra Hamaskil, Amisa, he says minta. So minta, let's see what he says here in that Gos V'Tzionim. Nikra Bizmanenu mint. Thank you very much. It is now called mint in the year 2020. Okay. Amar Abaye Shmamina. What do we see from here? Hi Ninya, this mint, ma'alya l'tachle. It adds good flavor to add it to cress. Very good. It's a good recipe. The osen anumlin b'Shabbos. We said in our Mishnah that you can make anumlin. Tana Rabbanan osen anumlin b'Shabbos vein osen aluntis. You're allowed to make anumlin, but you're not allowed to make aluntis. What's what? Ve'ezohi anumlin, ve'ezohi aluntis. Which one is which? Anumlin, the way we make anumlin, which is the one that's permissible to make is yayin udvash upilpulin. Sounds great. A little bit of wine, a little bit of honey, and a little bit of pepper. Givalda. What's aluntis that you're not allowed to make? Yayin yashan, older wine. Umayim tzelulim ve'afar simon, another mixture. That's not that was made for a different reason. Da'avde lebei mesusa lemekar. After a person came out of the bathhouse, it was very hot in the bathhouse, they would drink this to cool down. Amar Rav Yosef said, Zim nachada, one time, alis basar mar ukva lebebani. I came out of the bathhouse after mar ukva. Kinafki, after I came out of the bathhouse, asay ashkian chamra chadakasa. I came out of the bathhouse and they gave me this cup of wine, this mixtured cup of wine. I only had one cup. The chashimi binta de rashi ve'atufra de kari. And I felt it from the tips of my head to the toenails on my feet. Very powerful drink. So it says, V'ashkian kasa charina, had I had one more cup, havoy mistafina dilma menakuli mizachusa, I would have been afraid that they would have reduced my level of reward, de alma de asi. In the next world, I would have reduced my level of reward. So what does that mean? Is it because it's so enjoyable? So that's not, that's a good drink to try. Probably geschmack. It's a red. You're looking at it. It's old wine. It's mayim selulim and afar simon, givaldik. The other recipe is even easier, which is wine, honey, and pepper. It said, that's what the Gemara says, that he said, if I had one more cup, I was afraid that they were going to reduce my schar in olam haba. What does that mean, that they were going to reduce my schar in olam haba? So take a look at Rashi to understand that. This is Rashi about, where is it? Menakoli mizachi osai, about 10, 12 lines down in Rashi. And Rashi says, Im haisi nitzal mimenu shelo amus. It would have saved me from dying, and that being saved would have reduced my schar in olam haba. Wow, it's terrifying. Okay, that's what the Gemara says here. Let's one more line. Wait a minute. You were afraid that you were going to have your life saved. Mar Ukva drank it every day. So what are you talking about? This is such a powerful thing. You have to worry about your zechuyos of getting your life saved. Shiny Mar Ukva the dashbe. He was so used to drinking it that he was able to tolerate it. He could hold his liquor. He was able to drink this drink much more frequently. Next Mishnah, we're going to go until 4 lines from the bottom of the page. We're almost done. Ein shorin es ha'chiltis be'poshrin. You are not allowed to be shora, to soak a particular kind of root in poshrin. Poshrin are warm waters. Aval nos hachomet, you're allowed to put it in vinegar. Be'ein sholin, you're also not allowed to be sholin as hakarshinim. These are beans. Below shafan, so you can also not rub the beans in order to scrape off whatever's on the outside of them. Aval nosin letocha kavra o letocha kalkala. You can just throw them into this type of colander or sieve, and whatever falls out, falls out. In kovrin esatevin bekavra, you can't carry this straw and shake it up in a sieve. That's not allowed. You can't throw them up intentionally on a high shelf in order to have all of the chaff fall down. Aval notein hu bekavra, you can put it in notel hu bekavra. It can be put in the kavra. You just can't shake it around. The nos and the tocha evos, and you can put it in a trough to feed animals. You just can't go in there with the intention of shaking it up. Ibaya, you taught me in the beginning of the Mishnah that you're not allowed to be shore chiltis beposhrin. What if in fact I didn't listen to the halacha, I did it wrong, what should I do? It was taught in front of Rabbi Yosef. Shara, the person who did this, chayiv chatas, they're chayiv to bring the korban. It says Gemara, Amalei Abaye, if that's true, Elamayata, Shara umtza b'maya, hachanami d'mechayiv, anything you throw in water, you violate an isser doraisa. What's the isser doraisa? What could you have possibly done wrong? The water is not even hot enough to cook, so what are you worried about? No, we're not talking about midoraisa. It's an isser derabanan. Because that's a normal thing that you do during the week. You would have taken this root of chiltis, you would have put it in warm water. That's normal. On Shabbos, we have to change things up a little bit. Shabbos is different, so we have to make sure. Our Mishnah said you cannot put chiltis in kosher and you cannot put it in warm water. Here, I'm making a deal. If you're saying I can't make it in warm water, maybe I can make it in cold. Let me drop in the root. Says the Gemara, maybe I can put it in chiltis pitzoni. Amarle aser. He says you're not allowed. So he asks back to him, why? The implication from our Mishnah is that it is allowed. So he responds, Amarle imkain Ma bein li v'lach. Neither of us understand the Mishnah. We don't really know. I don't have pshat, and you don't have pshat. So then they conclude the following. It happens to be that our Mishnah doesn't agree with any of the other Mishnahs in regards to chiltis. Why? Because the Tanya, the Brisa writes in Shornas achiltis, lo bechamin v'lo besonin. That's not like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that it's allowed in kosherin, and seemingly it implies that it's not allowed in kosherin, and seemingly implies that it's allowed in sonin. Here it says it's not allowed under any circumstances. That's the Tanakama. And Rabbi Yossi omer bechamin aser betzonin mutter. Okay. So we don't know how we paskin in that regard about whether the chiltis can be put into cold water, but that seems to be a machlokas tanaim, and our Mishnah doesn't paskin like these two tanaim between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yossi, so our Mishnah is unclear. The Maya Avdile, what was this drink made for? This chiltis, that was the root that was put in water. So answers the Gemara, it was used for the yukra deliba, for something, this type of heart ailment. Obviously not a dangerous one, because if it was dangerous for Machal Shabbos, Pashat, that's the case. We're talking about Dine de Rabbanan, as the Gemara concluded. Putting chiltis into water, putting the root into water is not an Isser Daraisa. So Yukra Deliba is some type of heartache that isn't critical, that isn't life endangering. Ravacha Bar Yosef Chash Yukra Deliba, he had this heartache, Ravacha. Asa Lakame de Marukva, and they went to go ask Marukva Shaila. Amarle, Zil Shasi, Tilsa, Tikle, Chiltasa. You should drink 3 measures, Tikle, Taf and Shin, from the word Shakal, Lishkol. 3 measures of chiltasa, again, that you would take it and put it in warm water, and you drink it b'tvasa Yomi. You drink it over 3 days. So this happened to have been a Thursday. So Azal, he went, Ishtei Chamsha b'Shabsa, he drank it on Thursday, Uma le Shabbos, and he drank it on Friday, and he had to hit day 3. Day 3 was Shabbos. Litzafra in the morning, he's like, wait a minute, I need to go ask a Shaila, because I don't know what the din is. I was just told I'm not allowed to make this on Shabbos. Azal, Shal Be Medrash, I went to the base Medrash and said, I'm in the middle of taking chiltasa per my Rabbi. What should I do on Shabbos morning? Amrulay, Tana de Be Ravada, Va'amr Tana de Be Mar Bar Ravada, Shosa Adam Kavo Kabai Ben Choshesh. You can drink it, no problem. You can drink it. It's a regular type of drink, no problem at all. Amar Lahu, Lishtos lo Kami Baile. I'm not an Am Haaretz. I know I'm allowed to drink it. That's Pasha. Ki Kami Baile, Lishro is mine. I forgot to make it. Am I allowed to make it on Shabbos? I didn't prepare for Shabbos. So what should I do? I'm on day 3 of my medication. As a critical parenthesis, this Gemara is extremely important for people who are on medications around the clock. What if you're taking a medicine that's a one-off pill? Unless it's a mamish or a chola on Shabbos, you're not allowed to take it. What if you're in the middle of a regimen of antibiotics and you're on day 10 of your day 10? You feel fine. But if you don't take it, you become more immune to the. You should take it. You should take it, and it's based on this exact svar in the Gemara. Let's see how the Gemara answers. Amar lahu Rabchia bar Avin b'didi haba. This happened to me. Asay shilta. I brought this shiloh to Rav Ada bar Ava v'lo haba yiyada. He didn't have the psak for me. Asay shilta to Rav Huna, and then I went to go ask Rav Huna. V'amar hachi kamar. This is the pshat. He said, V'amar hachi kamar Rav. This is what Rav said. Shore b'tzonin u'maniach b'chama. You should put it in cold water and then take the whole bucket and move it outside. That's mutter to make it on Shabbos. It says the Gemara, wait a minute, is that only Kiman Deshari? Does that only follow the sheet of Rav Yossi that we saw in that brisa that allows to make this B'tzonei? Answers the Gemara, no. Afilu Leman Asar. Everyone would agree that you can do this on Shabbos. Even our Mishnah, even the sheet of the Tanakama that explicitly writes that you cannot make chiltis on Shabbos. Why? Hani mili hecha de lo ishte klal. When do we have our machlokas between Rav Yossi and the Tanakama, whether or not you're allowed to put chiltis into water? That's when you haven't had any yet. But if you're finishing your regimen, because you already had Thursday's dose and you already had Friday's dose, if you don't drink the last one on Shabbos, you're putting yourself in danger. And this is Ladina. When a person is on medication, they're obligated to take it on Shabbos if it's part of a regimen. If there's a way to work it out, you can take it before Shabbos starts and after it says something, okay, fine. But if you're on a regimen that's a 3 times a day pill, you can't get around that. Even a twice a day pill, what are you going to do? So that you don't have a choice. That you have to take that on Shabbos. Some poskim do ask the question about the 10th pill of the antibiotics, if it's really necessary. But if your doctors are going to say that it's going to make your body more resistant, and there's no shaila about those things. Of course, you should take them. No one should stop taking pills without getting a psak from a rabbi speaking to your doctor. Just now, today, on the way here, somebody texted me and said that they're about to get married, and the kala is trying to regulate herself because they're getting married. She's on birth control, so it's Tisha B'Av. So she take the pill on Tisha B'Av. You do not mess around with those things. That's like your chuppahs nida. Take the pill. Take it with less than an ounce of water. We've all heard Rabbi Robinson say that 100 times. You have to take a pill. You have to take a pill. You can take a dry swallow pill. Great. Not, then you can take it with a little bit of water. We do not mess around, and that's all from these Gemaras. We're going to stop here. We'll pick up on Shabbos, 6 p.m. at the bottom of Kuf Mem Amud Aleph.